Hello everyone, I just got done seeing The Godfather Coda, The Death of Michael Corleone. Now this is not going to be a review, this is just a video of me going over my thoughts on this new edit. Very rarely do we get a director's cut 30 years after a film's release. And that's what Francis Ford Coppola did. He gave back the original title, and instead of a grand finale, instead of a part 3, a trilogy to a story that was already completed, he brought us an epilogue that was a summation of the first two films. The greatest story ever told. The greatest films in the history of cinema with The Godfather and The Godfather Part 2. Now, I love the Godfather films. My parents, and more specifically my father, introduced the Godfather films to me. My brother showed me Part 2. And Part 3 was always kind of frowned upon. I didn't see that one until much later when I was in middle school. I was homesick and I saw it. And I really didn't have an appreciation for it till I got the Coppola Restoration Blu-ray. That film is an unnecessary film. It's made solely to make money. It's like the Star Wars sequel trilogy. The story is already done. The ending is pretty much the same as it was in Part 2. Was it necessary? No. And you wonder what could have been with all the production problems. Now, is this cut up to the level of the first two films? No. But I've never seen a film use the same footage, use the same film, and just little edits, different music cues, and rearrangement make it feel tonally like a completely different movie. I've never seen that happen with the same footage, with the same film. It practically has a different beginning and ending, and if you've seen the Blu-ray special features, you know what the alternate opening was. It's kind of like that. I wish it was more like zooming out of the camera, like on the guy's face and showing Michael like the meeting in the first one, but it does mirror the first Godfather with its opening. Besides that, you have a rearrangement, some additional dialogue here and there, some cuts, some lines or scenes completely omitted from this version. It's not to the level of the first two movies still, but it's a vast improvement, I think, to The Godfather Part 3. And it's strange because it's the same exact movie, but for some reason, it feels closer to the first two films. Without it being Part 3, it no longer is tied to the first two films. It's an epilogue. The story is already completed. This is just a wrap-up of what happened to the characters, the consequences of the choices made in Parts 1 and 2. In addition, because of that, it actually feels more like a Part 3 to me. I love that they made it shorter. The original version's like 170 minutes. This one's like 157. So it's not that much. But I do love that they cut some of Mary's lines, Sofia Coppola. You know, this wasn't going to be the best version. This wasn't going to be a Part 3 that measured up to the first two films unless you could insert Winona Ryder when she was younger or CG Tom Hagen with Robert Duvall. If you can't do that, that type of editing sorcery, it's not going to measure up to the first two, but this does work with what they already had, and I think it creates a more focused narrative. Then Part 3, the beginning, doesn't show the lake house, doesn't have that awards ceremony. It sets up the meeting that's 40 minutes in the original, and I love it. It's a perfect symmetry to the first film, but also the other two films as far as having a meeting, setting up events that are going to play a major part in the story, but then also having a certain event, like the dance in the 50s, like the wedding in the original, Michael's ceremony being honored by the church. It sets up all the major players at the party, and Andy Garcia's Vincent Mancini, aka Vincent Corleone, is introduced way earlier, and his importance is somehow felt. They cut out some of Connie's stuff, they add a little bit of Diane Keaton, but what I love the most is that Michael, even though it's the same footage, Michael feels like a stronger character in this version than he did in Part 3, and I can't explain it because they literally use the same footage, and in some parts it does play out the same way, but with different music cues, rearrangement of scenes, and just the way it's presented. It's just a stronger narrative, and I can't explain it. It's very rare. Usually you have director's cuts, you know, like Saturday Night Fever or Watchmen, they add more, but it's pretty much the same movie. And this is the same movie, but just the tone of it has a very different tone, and it feels more tragic. You know, in the original Godfather Part 3, I was clapping when Mary got shot. And this one, I felt kind of bad. They really improved the father-daughter relationship in this one. There's a line where she's just like, no, I'm not going to stop dating Vincent. And she like throws a fit and then runs like, no. And it's just really bratty. And this one, they just stick it with no. And then they cut, and it makes her appear as a stronger character. Everything done here is an improvement. Now, does it have its flaws? Yes, it does. There's some abrupt cuts that feel a bit amateurish, to be honest. It's like a fan edit where you edit abruptly. And I notice that. You know, I'm an editor, so I notice those things. It does move really fast. But I do like that they got a lot of the fluff out. There's a lot of unnecessary scenes in the original 3 that weren't needed. And because of that, this film goes by very fast. I was really digging the first half of this movie. The story issues are still there. The performance issues are still there. And what can I say? You can't change that much. So if you hated part 3, you might enjoy it more. If you love part 3, you're either going to enjoy this more or hate it. I've seen a lot of people hate it. They prefer the original 3. Here's where I'm conflicted is the ending. The ending, Michael lives. And that's a cool ending. But I've had a problem with Godfather 3. It was unnecessary. The ending, I liked him dying alone. It really showed the arc he went through and then the difference between Vito Corleone and Michael Corleone. But here's why I didn't like the ending on both of them. That same type of ending was already shown at the end of part 2, and it was done brilliantly with a flashback showing everybody leaving, Michael there being left alone, and then you get to see him, and he's like already aged at the end of part 2 alone. In essence, we've already seen that ending. The story's already done with part 2, so why do we go with part 3? And does Michael really need forgiveness? He's not a character that would ask for forgiveness. But at the same time, I always respected Godfather 3 to harken him back to Michael always wanting to break free from the crime family. He's kind of trying to get back to the Michael he was when he's just like, no, okay, that's my father. That's his business. It's not me, you know? I love that. But again, I feel like this version's more clear with wanting to break free, making a deal to go legitimate. I like it. And he's still kind of like the same Michael Corleone. He feels more like part 2 and part 1 in this new edit. There's just certain things that feel very much more like Michael than it did in the theatrical. He's less weak, even though he's a damaged old man. He's just tired of everything. Just when I thought I was out, they find a way to pull me back in, you know? And the ending, he lives. The problem I have with the ending is I like the montage and the music use of the original ending. You know, that song was used in the Watchmen's director's cut, like I mentioned earlier. I love seeing his first wife, seeing Kay, and then seeing his daughter, him losing all the women in his life and being alone and then dying with no one around him. But at the same time, I love this new ending that he is alive, even though it's identical to part 2, because that's a worse fate than death. He's dead without dying. He's spiritually dead. And I love the quote they have at the end about Sicilians, you know, wish you a long life. There's a saying about wishing a Sicilian a long life. But then at the bottom it says, Sicilians also never forget. So he's never going to forget that. He's in his own hell at the end in many ways. And it's just a stronger ending here. With the beginning and ending a rearrangement, who knew that so much could make a difference? Sometimes less is more. And I just wanted to talk about it. And for people who have seen the Godfather films, I know it's crazy. I love these films. I can't review them. They're perfect. I mean, if I made a video, it'd be an analysis video or going over themes, and that would take more than 20 videos because that's how multifaceted and how intricate the first 2 films are in the history of cinema. But I never thought I would talk about part 3 before 1 and 2 on this channel. And 2020 is one of those weird years where it surprised me with all the shit that's happened. And for once, I enjoyed The Godfather Part 3. If you told me at the beginning of the year that I would ever say that, I'd be like, yeah, right. Now, it is a film that has been hated on more than it should. It's a good film. It's not up to the first 2 films. It's mediocre compared to the first 2 films. And it's often a misunderstood film. You know, there's that famous Sopranos quote, but it is an endearing tale about redemption and forgiveness, and can anybody be forgiven for the life they led, you know? I wonder what it could have been. There's many different scripts that went around. What happened if Robert Duvall was in it? Winona Ryder definitely would have made the part of Mary a lot better. It would not only would have been a tragic story for Michael, but her acting would have made it a tragic love story with the Vincent and Mary relationship. Even though it's incest, that's what drove the Corleone family mad. Incest, some Lannister stuff there. But overall, this film still has its flaws, but this is the definitive version of Godfather 3 in my eyes. And I wouldn't feel bad rewatching this again with the first 2 films. Like, this was a perfect epilogue to the great story, the great novel that was The Godfather and The Godfather Part 2. And I love this re-edit. Now, it's not like the Apocalypse Now re-edit or Outsiders from Francis Ford or even the Godfather Epic with the TV version. I wish they released that on Blu-ray. That was a good version with the Corleone story in chronological order. But it was an enjoyable film, to say the least. And yeah, I'm just kind of blown away that they literally showed us the same film, but it just felt different in every way, and it's improved. It's respectable. And even though it's very far from the first two films, it's a bit closer now. And I like the connection to it, the music, and some of the effects and gore. There's some gore here. Some scenes that surprised me, especially with glasses. It would have been cool, though, they got older Al Pacino now and reshot the ending. That would have been kind of cool. I always thought they should have done a Godfather requel and just ignore part 3 and do one with Robert Duvall and Al Pacino now at their current age. But who knows? You know, we were supposed to have a Godfather 4 back in '99 before Mario Puzo passed away. They're going to have Leo DiCaprio, young Sonny, and then Vincent, much in the narrative structure of Godfather Part 2. It would be cool to see Andy Garcia back. I liked his role, like Joe Montana in this, and Eli Wallach. But it is what it is, and I have to say, I have better feelings on this film, and certain themes were already present there in the theatrical, but this made it more clear, it tightened it up, and it created a more entertaining experience, I think. And it really felt like a tragedy. It really hit you harder at the ending than the theatrical, I feel. There's some stuff that I have reservations about, I'm kind of split on, compared to the theatrical to the Coda cut, but overall, I highly recommend checking this out, especially if you hate part 3. You still might have the same feelings. It still has the same issues, but this is going to be a better film that feels more akin to the first two films. And a perfect epilogue summation to the first two Godfathers. Anyway, that's my thoughts about the Godfather Coda, the death of Michael Corleone. Feel free to subscribe for more videos. Check out these other videos for more content. You can follow me on the Stardust app at Fred Film Fanatic and Instagram at Fred Film Fanatic. I have a feeling we're going to have a lot more director's cuts, and after seeing this, I kind of want to see the Schumacher cut, the Ayer cut. I kind of want to see Sylvester Stallone's Rocky IV. I'm like, if so little could make that much of a difference on Godfather 3, what would other director's cuts be like?